Okay, we're on.
Hey,
What's going on, man?
not much.
What'd you do today?
Oh boy, I had Corbin today. Holiday, day off,
State holiday.
state holiday. Yep.
Such a weird holiday.
It's an awkward
Did you
holiday.
see
It's really weird.
Did you see what was going on at the park over there on Fairfield in Crestwood?
No, Oh, the reenactment or something,
I
the play
guess.
of some sort. Yeah,
That place was packed. I
It was
drove by
super
and I seen a
packed.
bunch of pioneers.
They
doing
did it last
square
night
dancing.
too.
Really?
Yeah, it was packed. The park was way packed.
Everybody dressed up in pioneer garb, dancing around.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah.
yep. Looked hot.
It looked awesome.
Interesting. No, had Corbin today. A little bored in the morning, didn't know what to do, and talked to Billy and Dustin. And they came down, and we went to the disc golf park up in Riverdale. Corbin had an absolute blast.
Yeah.
He's been wanting to play, so went and picked up a few discs in a little bag and headed up there. Super hot.
What kind of bag?
Just a little disc dynamics or dynamic
Just
disc
something that
bag.
came in?
No, I mean, you got to buy it separately. It's like $15. It was great. Threw a mini net on the back of it, and it cradled my big water bottle just fine. So I was able
really?
to carry it with me. And
Backpack or like a sling?
no, just a sling pack, and it's just a little one, 6-7 disc pack, but had a little room for extra
Are they
stuff.
slotted?
It's one big
Just one
compartment,
big compartment?
and then a back little compartment separated.
Man,
But for $15, it was worth it. It's great, actually.
now you're one up on me.
Yeah. Had a blast. It's a lot of fun. And I always laugh, maybe it's just me. I know there are people who do, especially the real pros, but people putting their name and phone number on the damn disc, like, does anyone want to call?
That's what I asked
Really?
Bill a while back. I'm like, is anyone ever in the history of disc called? And I think he told me he's gotten a call before.
I'm sure there's some people that do.
But I mean, to me, if someone called me and was like, I found your disc.
Yeah, unless you're at the park at the same time,
Yeah,
great.
I'd be
But
like,
otherwise,
keep it.
Yeah, it's not worth the time.
If
to
I
come and get
lose it bad enough, it's lost. But some people are hardcore, man.
I know.
Them guys that walk around and they've got, I'm not kidding you, 30 discs in the bag. Like those
That's a
guys
lot
we
of
came
weight.
up on those last time.
Mm-hmm. Big old rolling cart,
Those rolling
full of crap.
carts. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't need that. Okay, give me my
I
5
know.
discs maybe. But I say that now, but give me a couple of weeks and I'll have 30
know.
discs probably. But hope we get to play a lot more. And told them, I'd come down there every so often and try and play down there so they don't come up here all the time. But
Disc golf, for people that don't know, has been around a long time.
long time.
Long time. I think since the 70s.
Just
right?
hasn't been very popular.
No, but it's gotten huge.
Yeah.
It's gotten huge.
Can't wait. Big.
And I don't know if it was around before Ultimate Frisbee was, or have you ever watched Ultimate Frisbee on TV?
Bill and I were talking about this today, actually, because he says every time he turns to some certain channel,
Yeah.
it's always got Ultimate Frisbee
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And I used to love Ultimate Frisbee as a kid growing up.
Playing
and
it is a
watching
blast.
Yeah.
Watching it,
It's kind of like
I'm like not so
golf.
sure about. I watched a documentary on like the genesis of like Ultimate Frisbee.
Yeah.
And the whole process and the pioneers of it and all this stuff, and it was all started at a college level, a bunch of college guys playing it. It was pretty fascinating. It was a documentary on Netflix, but yeah, it's one of those. It's a blast to play,
It's a lot of fun.
but it's like golf in the way that it's frustrating as heck,
Oh, yeah.
especially when you're within like, man, even 20 feet of the basket, 20 feet and you're like, it's a fairly big target, and you're taking this big thing and you're throwing it at the target, and how many times you just miss.
You feel like you should be pretty accurate, but
Yeah, you just don't like
you're not.
and it's because it's a disc or something. Because if I had a palm-sized rock, I feel like I'd
Yeah.
underhand.
Well, there's
toss
so
it.
many mechanics that go into it, and timing and release and all that, and keeping that consistent to
Yeah.
where you are consistent.
You ever seen anyone putt by just
Flipping it end over
underhand
end.
flipping
No,
it?
I've heard, but I've never seen anybody
That one
do
thing
it.
Bill does is crazy.
It's
too,
cool.
though.
It works, except for today. He was struggling with it a little bit. He's still played better than last time we went.
Did he really?
I think he broke even, but 2 holes before the end, he was under par.
Oh,
and
really?
then 17, I think it was, he double bogeyed or something. It wasn't great, but anyways, back to my original point. So I got my disc, and I just wrote on them, "Congratulations on finding me."
You wrote that on both of them?
I wrote them on all of them. Said, "Congratulations on finding me. Let's face it, no one ever calls." That's exactly what I wrote on all my discs.
all of them? You
Yep.
put that?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah,
'Cause-
that's hilarious.
Why not?
Well, when some people, I know some of those discs are expensive, so some people,
Oh yeah.
want to get them back.
Yeah.
back in the day, unless I'm incorrect, in Salt Lake anyway, there was only the one disc park at Creekside.
Yeah.
And it got pretty popular, right? And they would have tournaments there and stuff like that. And at one point, Bill and I were so diehard, I'm sure you've heard the story before, that we would play in the wintertime. We'd play out there when there was snow on the ground.
Jeez.
We would be the only people in the park
I
playing.
bet.
And but you go to that park enough, and you start to run into the same people.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this dude there that used to have a long fire engine red hair, right? And he was at the park always. And he was one of these, reminded me of these 80s stoner dudes. Always had jeans on. Didn't matter how hot it was. You know, skinny, lanky guy. Obviously probably was white as hell as far as like his skin tone and stuff like that. And he drove like a old muscle car. It was a blue and white muscle car. I can't remember what it was. But you pull at the park, and sure enough, there he'd be.
It was probably an old Camaro.
Something like that, yeah. And we just started calling him Red because of his red hair.
Right.
And he was good, right? And he was good. And one time we're playing, just Bill and I, and we're chucking through the course, and we come up to a hole, I think it was hole 13 or something like that. Not a very long hole, par 3 or something like that. And we catch up with Red and his group of guys, and they probably had 5 or 6 guys. And they let us play through. And I remember the discussion we were having, being insecure little babies.
Yeah.
We're like, dude, we're going to catch Red and stuff, and having to play through on guys that are good just makes you feel like an idiot, right?
Right.
And we get to this hole, and they're like, yeah, you guys go ahead and play through. And in the basket was right behind a big tree. And to the left were some trees, and to the right was fairly open, but you had to go around the tree one way or the other.
Right.
So Bill gets up and throws forearm. And I'm telling you, man, back then, not a lot of people threw forearm.
Right.
You didn't see it a whole lot. So Bill just hucks it and takes off, and ching, hits basket. Doesn't hole in one, but hits chain.
Oh, no way.
And all the dudes standing there were like, whoa, nice, yeah, nice. And now I'm up, and I'm like,
oh,
dude,
crap.
yeah. So I get up there, huck it. Dude, I go right-handed because he threw forearms. So he's going left of the tree. I'm coming around the right of the tree. Ching, hits chains. The dudes were like, oh, shit, yeah.
No way.
Bill and I walked out of there like we
feeling
just
like kings.
won the PGA Tour or something like that. It was hilarious, dude. Right in front of Red, the guy. He was the guy. He was always at the park. He was the guy.
Yep.
So, yeah, no, it was always
funny.
It was always a blast. One time when I went back to California to visit and was playing disc all the time, I found out there was a disc golf park off 8 Mile Road way out there, this park called, I think, Oak Ridge Park or something like that. So I went out there with Jim, and I can't remember who else, but the park was off was 8 Mile Road, which was kind of a main, I'd call it a 2-lane highway out that went forever, through all the cities and whatnot, but fairly busy road. But the road, just ran parallel with the course. There weren't even really any baskets too close to the road, but, the road's to the left, and we're throwing out, and Jim's there, and he hasn't played before, but we're already in, 10 holes or so. And he hucks a disc, and he totally shanks it. I don't know how. That thing takes off, shooting left, but it's starting to bank left now too. Mm-hmm. And it's heading straight for the road out there. And here comes a minivan. And you just see that you can see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but all of a sudden that disc tags the van. Tags it.
No way.
Where you're like, because those discs are heavy, man.
Oh, yeah.
And they're strong. And we're thinking broken windshield. We're so far away, you can't really see, but tags it. The car pulls over. We run over there. It had hit I don't know what you call it, the frame. It hit the frame on the right-hand side of the windshield,
right.
Where the door is and everything. Mm-hmm. It dented the metal, dented the frame up there. And it was a lady driving it, and she was super cool and got out, and we were like so glad it didn't hit her window and whatnot. She's like, I'm just driving along, and something goes whack. Scared the crap out of her, but I've seen people get hit with those on the course.
Oh, they hurt, man. They're heavy. They're no joke.
Well, at Creekside, you used to get a lot of people that would just be out there strolling in the park
just
with their
being in
kid.
the park, yeah.
And it's a disc golf park.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got areas for playgrounds, and they got an area for Ramada, but people would like to go down by the creek and stuff. And, there'd be people just out doodle-oo-to-do, throwing, and they'd be like, yeah.
Or
And they'd get pissed if a disc came anywhere near them.
for sure.
It's like, this is a disc golf park.
Yeah.
But fun sport, for sure. What'd you finish at?
Oh, I finished at 3 over, I think it was.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I was saving par pretty much all day long, and then had a few holes, a few birdies, but I almost chained a couple of them. It was really close on one.
What? So you're saying you're getting your accuracy down?
Getting better for sure. For sure.
What is it about disc golf? Because, like, we got a handful of family members that are addicted, they'll play multiple courses in a day. They'll take off work to go play. I mean, they'll play all the time. So, and there's people that golf that are like that.
Sure.
And I'm sure there's other outdoor activities. But do you think that, I always wondered this, because it's like, I don't know anyone that goes and plays basketball as much as these guys play disc. And I can't say that I've ever known anyone that's played basketball that much.
Yeah.
Except maybe the kid around the corner shooting hoop at his home or whatever. But I was wondering if the allure of things like golf and like disc golf aren't just, people say that they love it because you're just competing against yourself ultimately.
Right.
So fine and dandy, whatever. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you're outside.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to get outside and you're walking. I mean, it's a good, healthy thing. You're walking the course, and depending on the course, you're out there for a good 2-3 hours sometimes, and it is because inherently, usually at least, most disc golf courses have a lot of obstacles and a lot of angles, and there's a lot of geometry to it, and then it's encompasses everything. I know golf, there's a lot of that too, but you're usually wide open for the most part. But there's trees you got to bank around, and there's this you got to watch out for, and that you got to watch out for, and
it's very challenging.
It is challenging.
Yeah, mentally challenging and frustrating as hell too.
Oh, it's just like real golf that way. It's terribly frustrating.
Oh, I think there's something like playing a course, like the DATC has a course, and according to the guys, it blows.
Oh, really?
It's all just real tight and right there.
Yeah.
But there's something about like that course up there where you're in the trees and things like that, which is kind of my point. Is like there's something about doing something out
in nature.
Yeah, in nature.
Yeah.
But like even though you're in a city, but it's a park by a river.
Yeah.
Up there at Riverdale, and but there's something about it having trees and stuff like that. Like when I'm out there playing, especially if there isn't a lot of people around, and I'm walking from point A to point B, it kind of reminds me of, when we go down to the desert and that feeling you get when you're just kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
You got a few people with you.
Well, you're kind of just doing what you're doing.
Right. It's like that whole thing. It's the ultimate now moment.
Right. It kind of forces it on you in a way.
Yeah. So we go once a year down to southern Utah in a mountain range called the Wawa Mountains. And we've been doing it for, what did we decide?
True. 13 years, I think.
13 years, and probably have been 15 times, because there was a couple years we went twice a year.
Right.
In the spring-ish and then the fall.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a real special place for us. And it all kind of stems because Bill, our uncle, was for I think for a couple years, maybe a year, took a job with a company down there doing wilderness therapy for at-risk youth and state kids have been put into state programs and things like that. So anyway, he spent a lot of time down there learning and then teaching different, survival skills and hiking these kids around out in the middle of nowhere. So one year for my birthday, we went just to go camping down there, and that's kind of how it all started. But we love to go down there and just kind of rock hound when we're, amongst other things, hiking and obviously camping and exploring different, ridges and rock faces and stuff like that. But going out there and just kind of rock hounding and looking for cool. There's a lot of agate down there, a lot of agate that you can only find in Utah. There's even a lot of crystal and things like that. And so, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but ever since a kid, I've nerded out on that because of our grandpa at one point. But man, that's kind of the last time we went discing. I kind of had that moment, even though it's quite a bit different.
Sure, yeah.
I still had that kind of moment, that crunch of the leaves on the ground as you're walking, and just the dirt crunching under your feet, and that sound. It kind of threw me back to being in the desert this last May. So
it's a good place to be.
Yeah. It's definitely, with the amount of time we put into planning a desert trip.
But remember what we used to do, man?
I was just going to say,
crap.
It used to be quite extensive.
It used to be very extensive.
Yeah. Now it's
pretty simple, comparatively speaking, now.
So to that point, like, what? Because you just said that, and I was thinking about the first couple times we went down there, and we had, a decent group of people, 6 maybe or something like that, 6 or 7, and we would bring beverages like water and sports drinks, and at the time we brought cases of water, right? That popping you hear in the background, by the way, is fireworks because of the 24th.
Welcome to Utah.
Anyway, we packed a bunch of water bottles and Powerade bottles, like cases of them. So we're going down there with these cases, and super inefficient, because fast forward a bunch of years, and you bring water jugs, most of which you fill up down there at Springs.
Yeah.
And any kind of, whether it be like Gatorade or anything like that, you just bring powder.
Yeah.
And just mix it up. So you have way less waste, way less trash, way less waste, or weight and stuff like that.
We used to do things way differently. Well, and naturally, the progression of the desert trip has changed, and so has, how we have to prepare for it too.
Yeah, but why do you think it is? Excuse me. Why do you think it is that it takes doing something multiple times before you find more efficient ways to do it? Because a lot of that's common sense. Like, that's common sense. Why bring cases of bottled water, right, when you can just bring, even if you fill up 2 5-gallon jugs with nozzles on them, it's way more efficient than bringing a bunch of water bottles,
it's just,
and cheaper.
Just ignorance at the time, just not thinking about it for the most part. And we used to kind of prepare for the group rather than everyone prepare individually in a way.
Well, that's how it's changed big time too.
And I think it was just easier probably. Yeah. But like anything, the more experience you get, hopefully the better you become at it, and the more you learn from your mistakes.
Right.
So
right.
I think that's just kind of natural progression of it.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, as we're sitting here talking about it, there's a part of my head going, this is such a boring conversation. But actually thinking about it, and I know a ton of people that are always like, because it's such a thing, everybody I know knows that at the end of May, I'm disappearing for a week.
Right.
So I think actually a lot of people probably, because I've been asked numerous times, what do you do down there? What really goes on in the desert?
Right.
Because we come back first of all, we're so excited to go every year.
Yeah.
And as Bill says, it's kind of like his new year, which I agree with.
Right.
But every time we go, we're excited to go. Every time we come back, you either, had a blast, or you come back and you get the desert funk,
The good old desert funk.
Good old desert funk.
Mm-hmm.
So desert funk is when you get out there, you get away from everything. No cell phones work out there. So you're totally disconnected. And it might take a day or two, is what I find. Sometimes right off the bat.
Yeah.
But it takes a while to kind of get used to not having that kind of noise happening all the time. Your phone beeping, ringing, and stuff like that. But point being is that
the anxiety it causes, man. Think about it too.
Tons of anxiety.
How connected we are. How connected we are. There is no free time anymore. There is no alone time anymore.
Not really.
You're connected constantly.
I know. And we're all individually guilty of it.
Oh, for sure.
Well, how about when something's going crappy in life, or you've got maybe a little bit of anxiety? Maybe it's not just crappy, but you got a little bit of anxiety. And like, I'm holding my phone here, right? And it's like all of a sudden your phone dings and you get more anxious.
Yeah.
Because you're worried about who it is, and what they say or what they're gonna say or what. I hate that, dude.
No, and then you suffer at the inversely speaking too. When you do lose connection, now you're anxious that you're missing something because you're so used to being connected. Even though I think our souls thrive for being disconnected for at least a brief amount of time.
Well, studies show it's healthy for our cognitive abilities.
Yeah, absolutely has to be. But
it's actually the best. It's actually the best once you disconnect and then you kind of adjust to that. And like if you spend any time outdoors, anyone knows this, but for people who don't spend a lot of time outdoors, we'll take new people down in the desert, usually a family member or a close friend, because we're kind of really protective of who we take down there because we want them to quote unquote get it. But you can see, and personally experience it too, but you can see people struggle with that disconnect.
Oh, for sure.
Before they really, all there is where
naturally,
you're at right now.
We're programmed to it now. We're programmed to it, and that's, think about it back in, I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago for sure. You couldn't get a hold of somebody. You just couldn't get a hold of them for the time being, leave a message, whatever it is, or you page them anymore. But now we're so entrenched and conditioned to being connected all the time that, your girlfriend or your mom can't get a hold of you. They call you 3 freaking times. Dude. Can't get a hold of you. Now it's all panic mode and shit.
We sound like old men, but I miss when people couldn't get a hold of you. Mm-hmm. Like literally, I've had experiences recently, just the other day, where I'm going, up to the shop. I go to stop at the gas station first because I got to put some gas in the car. And right as I'm getting out of the car to pump the gas, a message comes in, bling. I preview it real quick. I'm like, okay, yeah, there's so-and-so. Okay. Set the phone down in the car, go pump the gas, then go inside to get a coffee and have my phone in my pocket. And I hear it ding again, but my hands are full of stuff. I'm up at the register. I'm, trying to pay, and I'm walking out to the car and it dings again. No kidding you. I look, and the duration of from the first message to when I get back to the car is literally 4 or 5 minutes.
3.5 minutes, yeah.
And the last few messages, like,
are you there?
Why aren't you answering? Why aren't you answering me?
Yeah, for sure,
dude. Like people expect immediate response, and if you don't, something's wrong.
Yeah,
there is no thought of like, oh, well, maybe they're taking a crap, or maybe they're holding something and can't get to their phone, or maybe they just walked into another room.
Maybe the phone died.
Maybe the phone.
There's a thought.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Technology is amazing and has its place. The speed of business nowadays and so on. But and it has its advantages. But I challenge you to really think: at what sacrifice?
Well, I think we're at like a weird space in human history, right? Like this whole being connected is a fairly new thing.
Everything's connected. Your fridge is connected to your phone and to your life now.
Well, not my fridge because I have but there are fridges.
I mean,
your car, your fridge, everything. But I mean, like it's new. I mean, we're new. We're these biological creatures experiencing this kind of new, interfacing with technology, and so we're learning how to do it. But yeah, at times it gets a little bit overwhelming. That's what's nice about going to the desert, is that you get a disconnect from that.
Yeah,
and as horrible as this sounds, it's such a great healing thing for the soul, is that when you're down there, or when we're down there, and if something were to go horribly wrong at home, you'd have no clue.
No.
You'd have no way of knowing unless someone ventured out to find you.
Nope.
You'd have no way of knowing. You'd have no clue. And there's a little bit of anxiety about that. Well, what if this or what if that? But once you go and you do it and you disconnect and you're gone and you come back and everything's okay, it's definitely a valuable lesson,
Very much so. Yeah. It's definitely freeing.
So we never really got to explaining it, but what you just put it in your words, what desert funk is.
No, it's kind of what we were talking about. Desert funk is you've been with Mother Nature, you've been disconnected, and you've been just the responsibilities of each task at hand. You've been very present for days on end, and you come back to the interference patterns, the wave, the signals and the noises and the chaos of life. And I think it's overwhelming. I think it overloads my senses, at least for me personally speaking. It overloads, and it's just I mean, because it's instant. As soon as you hit that signal range, and you got to turn your phone on, it's just ding, 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 and it's just. I think that's what the funk causes from.
Yeah, it causes like an instant kind of low grade depression.
To some degree, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Oh, I've had it bad before, dude. Where I'm just like, I don't want to talk to anyone. I want to do anything when I've come back, and it can last a couple days.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea of desert funk. I just kind of, I know that's a big tangent, but that whole thing about what happens to you when you're outside for a little bit, and I think that's like, because evolutionarily speaking, that's the bulk of human existence is being outside.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much all of it.
Yeah, hunter-gatherer and, stuff like that is that we just spent way more time outside.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what's weird is I think about this because it's like the whole parent-kid thing, right? It's like we remember being young and being outside the house all the time, right? Riding bikes, being gone for hours on end or whatever.
Yeah.
And kids today just don't do that. Teenagers today just don't do that. And like I'll sit there and tell my daughter, like she won't, be out of school or whatever and not have nowhere to go necessarily and be in the house for 2 days straight, and not have maybe even stepped outside once to even go anywhere.
It's sad.
But the thing is are we any different? Because it's not that I was thinking about this. It's not necessarily that they're kids and the kids have changed. It's that all humans have changed.
Well, yeah, society has changed.
I mean, obviously as an adult you have more responsibilities and more things to do.
Sure.
But how many adults that go to work, come home, and then go, oh, I'm going to go outside and, ride my bike, or I'm going to go outside and...
Not many, because you are an adult and you have responsibilities, and that's a lot of mental energy. That's a lot of physical energy. And not to say kids don't expend a lot of energy, but the kids have a ton of energy too. And it's I'm bored. You're not sitting at home as an adult going, I'm bored. If I got to hear I'm bored or what's there to do.
So do you get bored?
No, I mean, no, I don't get bored. I get relaxed and chill, but like Corbin or the kids, I'm bored. Right. What can I do? Get the hell up and go ride your bike around the block. Yeah. I was gone down to the McCallum River for hours on end riding my bike through that place, and I think society has changed. It doesn't seem like you had to worry as much. It wasn't in the media as much, or I didn't pay attention to it. Now that I'm older, maybe I do, but there are certain worries and dangers you got to worry about just sending your kid loose in the neighborhood for hours on end. But shit's gonna happen at the same point.
But I know adults that get bored too. All the time. That literally say I'm bored. This is the thing. Like I think because a lot of what you're talking about with kids is like imagination.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that using your imagination to create worlds and environments to entertain yourself when you're young is a second nature thing. I mean, you've got a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And he does it all the time.
Yeah.
I just think nowadays, because of technology, I think kids lose, I wouldn't say the necessity, they just lose the necessity to use their imagination sooner than they did.
I think they actually lose their imagination to some degree too.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, let's call it a muscle, and they lose the ability to exercise that muscle, so it atrophies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember by today's standards, like kids I know this age now would probably laugh at the stuff I would do with my imagination at that age. So 13 or 14, right? Which I'd be out in the backyard with a bunch of scrap lumber my dad had.
Yeah.
And I would build a box spaceship thing and take marker and draw control panels everywhere and sit out in that damn thing for hours at like 13 years old going boop, boop, beep, boop. I think a 13-year-old now would go, what is that little kid doing in that? That's what I feel like anyway. But that exact scenario that I'm telling you about, like that became one of my most intriguing little worlds, is sitting in that little fighter jet or whatever it was.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Which kind of, and that's the thing, like we've talked about this before, but you were younger than Bill and I, so you didn't ever really do this. But you, of course, have heard us talk about it ad nauseum, and you get this because you and I are this way. But we have a phrase, for those listening that we call, it's building the GI Joe fort, or building the fort. Because we figured this out a long time ago. As we were really on the GI Joes, and out where Grandma lived, they lived in a bunch of, they wide open space right in the mountains, where you could walk out your back door and be literally on a mountain off the back porch. But we used to go out under the big apple tree or out in one of the fields, and we'd build these GI Joe forts, and they were complex roads. We'd dig out little pits where you then lay sticks over the pit and then cover it with leaves and then cover it with dirt, so they're little huts and stuff. And we'd get this whole village built for all the GI Joes and all very detailed. And then we'd start, all right, it's time to play. And then you'd start driving your Joes around and stuff like that. And we'd get bored like that.
How quickly it ends.
Because the fun is building it.
No, it is. Absolutely.
And that's like with adults too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the key, I think, to finding fulfillment as an adult and not getting stagnant, or one of the ways is build your fort.
It's like a lot of these phrases or quotes that last through the ages, right? And it seems like a lot of people don't put any stock into them, or they say they do, but really are they like the joys in the journey? These things last through the ages for a reason, because of the truth behind them. It's like the desert for me. The joy is in the journey. Forget the destination. Forget where you're headed.
Okay.
Enjoy the damn journey, because that's where you're going to find the most fulfillment out of it.
Well, I mean, guess where the journey is? It's in the now.
Right.
It's
always in.
So it's hard for ego to sit there, and it's hard for you to, be down on yourself.
That's just what I'm frustrated with in today's world. It seems like so many people are heading for something somewhere. Some destination. When I get this, and this, then I'll be fulfilled.
Right, which causes anxiety.
Oh,
it causes
a ton
all
of
kinds
it.
Of stuff.
Depression. It causes health issues. It causes all sorts of crap.
Richard Moss in his book The Mandala Being would call the future position.
Yeah.
Is how much time are you spending in the future position? But back to the desert, to give an example, when everyone's different, right? Because we go down there with basically the same group of guys every year for the last 13 years. And sometimes, this guy can't go 1 year or 2 years in a row, and then this guy's here and there, But I think the core, like me, you, and Bill, we've pretty much been, we have been every year since the beginning. Well, Bill's different than we are, right? And everyone's sitting here going, who's Bill? Who's Bill? Well, Bill's our uncle, but he's only a year older than I am. So he's just a few years older than you.
Yeah.
And so he's more like a brother.
Right.
And you'll get to know Bill later, because we're going to do a great podcast with him. But we're different. Like, you and I are the same. That whole building the fort thing.
Yeah.
It's one of my most favorite things to do still. 42-year-old man, go camping. And this doesn't mean just the desert. This is anywhere. But desert is where it's extreme. You go down there. One of my favorite things to do is, well, let me step back. Like a guy like Bill, you pack your gear up to camp, right, at base camp, and first thing he wants to do is, wants to throw his gear down, make a drink, step out on the rock face and enjoy a drink and have a smoke, stuff like that. The first thing I want to do is get my gear up, start setting up, start building camp, start setting the dry fly, setting the guidelines, using the pack attach this way, that way. Building the fort.
Yep.
It is one of the most relaxing things about going down there.
Yep.
And it's so satisfying to be out hiking around or whatever and come back to camp and going, all right, everything's just where it needs to be.
Comfortable.
But what I love is might be sitting there in the hammock or sitting there in the camp chair, at my little camp, and go, oh, it'd be better is if I angled that this way, or put this that way, or I move my cooking table over here. I mean, you'll go, like, you do this even more than I do. You'll go as far as to create basically like a kitchen area with inlaid stones, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a number of different reasons. Besides, it is the feng shui. It is the practice for me that I love.
It's like a rock garden.
Exactly. And it's a form of therapy in a way. And, call it perfectionist, call it OCD, call it what you will. I know what I get out of it, and I enjoy the hell out of it. But there's lots of reasons, stone, keep it up, to try and keep as much dirt and bugs out of my cups and my gear and my stuff as possible. And
a lot of it's about making things easier
Listen, when you end up with a scorpion in your underwears, you're about ready to pull them up onto your ass, and you look down and see a scorpion in there.
Yeah.
You tend to learn and keep your gear off of the ground.
Well, then, or you see someone else, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, out of nowhere, lightning strike, hail starts falling down. It's hailing so loud. We're 20 feet from each other. We can't hear each other, and
it's just a downpour.
And it's flooding.
Yeah.
Right? And you see the guy, Bill, who hasn't spent the day preparing camp, over there, flustered, rain's coming down, he's getting soaking wet, this is getting wet, that's getting wet. Cursing and yelling. Right? Meanwhile, the preparation, I mean, what do they say? That chance favors the prepared, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever. I mean, it's just like that. Because down there, you never know what's going to happen.
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
And that's kind of, I like to take that. That's the thing about the desert. Now, you go anywhere and learn these lessons, right? And do these things. But you get down there, and for us, I think the desert's, there's something unique about the desert. And I feel extremely lucky that we found this one particular location down there that is unique to us. And we've had some great experiences and great shared memories there.
That place is unique to the entire area and valley. There's not another place like it.
I mean, 600,000 square miles of a valley, basically.
I don't know if it's that big.
I swear that's what...
600,000 square miles is a lot of area.
It's big.
It is big.
Whatever it is. 600. Yeah, it might be. I might have just...
I mean, maybe 600.
A lot of hyperbole there. So, but, I mean, we've been all over that valley, and we've tried to find places like the one place that we go, the specific spot.
You won't find it.
And you can't find it. Mm-hmm. It's just position, it's angle, where it's at, what's around it, the water sources nearby, all that stuff. It just makes it perfect. But, you know, the reason I bring that up is because it's like so many lessons you can find when you're in a place like that where you are disconnected and all you have around you are what you've brought, the people that you're with, and the resources around you. And if you can settle into that, right, and you cut the disconnect, you disconnect the signals coming from home and the things you might be worried about. That's the whole practice. It's like what you were saying about the desert funk. It's basically because when you're down there, you're getting washed. You're getting kind of rebaptized.
Yep. You're equalizing out to your true nature.
You're coming back to baseline.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but those lessons of down there, you know, those are things that like I've learned down there, because the thing about the desert, right? And we talk about the desert a lot because it's such a big part of kind of where we're at, what we do, and who we are. But one of the big things about the desert is it doesn't give a shit. It doesn't give a shit what you're going through, what you got going on back home, what you're stressed about. It's just a big open face mirror that will just reflect back whatever you give it. So if you go down there with a bad attitude, or you're down there and you're bitching and moaning about the rain and stuff, well, guess what? You're going to have a hell of a time with the rain and the weather if that's what you're resisting. And that's the basic lesson of the desert, is if you resist whatever's happening, it's going to come back and slap you in the face tenfold. That's why you just got to go with the flow down there.
Yeah.
Which is a lot harder to do in life when you're back in the, you know, craziness of it all.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's the same idea. It's the same idea. If you can just learn to stop resisting what's happening.
Why do you think people... And I think a lot of people mentally masturbate to the idea because they understand it. Society, unfortunately, you feel trapped in current society standards and stuff. But why do you think so many people are going back to a minimalist, standpoint? Selling off everything they own and going very minimal. I mean, I think like Jim Carrey's done it even. Someone famous who has all the money he could possibly have, but finds himself to be happiest with almost nothing and living a very simplistic, minimal life. Mm-hmm. There's something very cleansing about it.
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to look at that. I think maybe the pessimist or the negative outlook guy would say it's just one of these fads that has been popularized.
So is that you? Are you the negative guy?
No. Because what I think is that I think it's much deeper than that. I think it's a call. I think it's like the call of the wild. I think it's a human biological need that we have for the basics, and that when we so I think that the if there is what you'd call a movement towards minimalism, I think it's because the pendulum is swinging back the other way. It's starting to swing back the other way, and whether that's away from technology or away from, you know, the dense, you know, I mean, it's as simple as this, right? Scientists show something in human biology or the human brain called Dunbar's number. And Dunbar's number says that basically your brain has the ability to remember about 150 names and faces at any one given time.
Right.
Right. And they believe that's based on the hunter-gatherer era of human evolution, is that's about as big as a tribe would get back in the day.
Right.
And so you had no evolutionary need to be able to remember more people than that, you know, because tribes would get big enough and they would split in all cultures. They'd split
Right.
off or whatever like that.
Yeah.
You know, and then with the advent of the stone, you know, or past the Stone Age, when people started to, you know, get into things like the, you know, the Bronze Age and things like that, then we started to grow our communities bigger and bigger and bigger because we could protect them more efficiently and we could shelter and feed them more efficiently and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's a pendulum swing back to, there's something in us that, you know, and people that spend time outdoors, you know,
They get it.
and I mean,
Or they've had tastes of it and glimpses of it.
well, we're not saying anything they don't already know.
No, for
and
sure.
like what we do is nothing compared to what some, you know, like these through hikers that hike, you know,
Oh, yeah.
the Pacific Crest Trail or
No,
the
for
Appalachian
sure.
Trail, and they're out there for 4 or 5 months, you know, hiking these trails. But even then, like on those trails, you're running into a bunch of people. You're stopping through towns, you know, which is cool and probably a amazing experience. And I'd like to do it
Sounds
someday.
really, really fun.
But I still like the idea of going somewhere where you're not going to see a soul except for the people that you're with.
Yep.
You know? And I don't know, man. I think that's what I think. I think it's a swing of the pendulum because I feel it too. And you know it. You spend a year getting close to the desert, a few months out, and you start to feel that, oh my gosh, dude, I can't wait to get out of here.
Yeah.
And it
for sure.
seems like the world is just
Closing
throwing-
in
Yeah,
on
like
you.
it's just throwing rocks at
It's
you.
trying to mess things up in
It's
a way.
trying to get you not to go,
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah. But the ego is getting you not to go. It's, you know, it's throwing shit at you to. That's one of my favorite things about the desert. I know we've talked about this kind of in the past, but sitting on the rock or on the bluff, wherever you might be, even if we're, you know, doing a hike and we're spending the night somewhere else and we're tucked within, you know, a little cluster of junipers or whatever it might be, you know, we just find the spot that looks good and set up camp.
Right.
And pretty soon it becomes camp. But my favorite thing is just sit there and the perspective is amazing to me. And maybe this is just my own crazy thing, but mentally I'll do it. I'll just envision and think I am this nothingness. I am this speck
In this spot.
in this spot on the
Right.
grand scheme of things. I am this speck sitting in the middle of absolutely nowhere with no one consciously aware of where I am
Nobody
at,
knows
or
where
no
you're
one
at.
gives a fuck or a shit where I'm at.
Right.
And mentally just in my mind, I'll just kind of zoom out, like if I was zooming out from outer space or a telescope or something, and I'll just watch that point of where I'm at get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller the further out I go. And it's just humbling. It's an amazing perspective
Well, it's because, like you're saying, right?
because we all want to feel so damn important.
Right. Well, and here's what I love that analogy because, at least as you're describing that analogy, here's what I'm thinking. You're sitting on that little rock, right? And I think on the rock, what we call the rock, which is a cliff face that overlooks the whole valley, it's a greatest view you'll ever
Gorgeous.
see. But even when we're out, you know, doing a couple overnighters and we're down in the juniper forest and you don't have a view, but maybe
Mhm.
you're sitting on a little rock, right, or your chair or something. Even in that 360-degree sphere of where you're at, within 10 feet of you, okay, you got your camp right there. There's your hammock. There's your backpack. There's your food. You got the fire pit going. All these quote unquote comforts of being out there, and then you're significant. My area, my stuff, like we just
Right.
talked about building
Right.
our fort. But that idea and that exercise that you just talked about is the more you zoom out, like literally like Google Earth zooming
Exactly.
out,
Yep.
you become less and less significant until when you're zoomed out far
You
enough,
become nothing.
you're nothing. You're not even nothing. You're nothing within nothing. Because now even the 10 square mile area that you're sitting in, if you zoom out far enough, is nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is. That's a pretty cool thing to think about when you're there.
It really puts it in perspective. Life in general, me as myself, and what I believe myself to be, and so on. Just all that. And on the grand scheme of things, it's just, I don't know. It's very humbling, and I think people need to be humbled, and it's very, very, very humbling.
I'm kind of getting goosebumps.
I know, me too.
Because I think you're hitting on something here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being out somewhere like that versus being like at a park playing disc golf, the vastness is humbling, and that's what a lot of people are missing. Space. Space. We're by no means like these crazy adventure outdoorsmen.
No.
We go camping here and there, but we take this one big trip once a year. But it's the meaning behind the trip. It's the experience of the trip. The intent of it. The challenge. It's the intent of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's people that don't like camping, have never spent a day camping in their life. And I don't mean camping in an RV. I don't mean camping at a campground where there's bathrooms 20 yards down the paved asphalt road, right? I'm talking about camping where there's nothing. Where there's nothing. Where you've got to dig your own fire pit. You know what I'm saying? Where you got to pack out all your garbage.
You got to find just the right shitting location.
Yeah, very important. Burying your shit. Yeah.
Even then, when we are in the desert, how we've got our campsite, and usually I'll stay within a 25, 30 yard radius of the fire pit and stuff, and we just kind of spread out, find our own little spots,
our
and so on.
Individual spots, yeah.
Right. If you're going off trolling around, or you're going whatever, need to go use the restroom, it's amazing. You get 15, 20, 30 feet outside of that radius, and you've almost lost camp, and this noise goes away even within itself. Camp's right there, but you even get it just a little bit out.
Oh yeah, the noise goes away.
Yeah, and you can't see camp no more. You can't hear camp no more.
Yeah. Well, two things, right? One, we in the area that we go, we know it backwards and forwards and sideways, right?
Right.
But that being said, sometimes when I'm just going up the little, tri-peak right there,
right,
and I'm paying more attention to what's under my feet, looking at some of the rock features, or getting up to and I'm coming back down. I did it last year. Bill and I went up there looking for something we saw a few years ago, a little weathered little cave thing, and we couldn't find it. We're kind of disoriented, but we're coming down, and I'm down now at camp level, right? And I start heading towards basically the cliff face, where you walk down to go to the trucks,
right?
And Bill was over to my right, but I'm so engrossed in just kind of the ground under my feet that I walk right by camp out there, right? And I'm like, whoa. Point being is that even when you're used to the area, it's amazing how disappeared things get.
Yeah.
And I remember when we brought a good friend of mine back in 2008, Darren came out with us, and we were up in an area where the junipers are a little bit bigger, and it's a real flat area, and we're walking, and everyone's just kind of rock hounding, right? Looking for crystals, looking for agate and stuff like that. And I remember, because Darren was about 20 feet off to my right, and then the trees got a little bit thicker, and all of a sudden it's dead quiet.
Yep.
And we have this little whistle we do to kind of locate each other so that we can know where we're going, because it's easy to start drifting off one way.
Well, especially when you're trolling and you're just looking at the ground and you're rock hounding and you're not paying attention to much else other than the ground. You get 30 feet from somebody out there in those junipers, and you don't hear them no more. They're gone, and you stop and go, oh shit.
Yeah.
I mean, it can pucker your butthole a little bit sometimes.
Exactly. Like sometimes I felt like and what's funny is like sometimes you got to crouch down and get at trunk level, and you can sometimes see some legs moving.
Yeah.
But yeah. And I mean, I'm not kidding you. You could be 30 yards, which isn't nothing.
Mm-mm.
And I don't see you at all.
No.
And that's why I know Bigfoot's real.
You'd barely hear my whistle.
I know. Oh, for sure. That's for sure, dude. That's what's crazy is sometimes you do the whistle call out and you barely hear it. But you hear it, so you head that way, and they're right there.
Yeah.
Because those trees just grab that sound. And everything about that place is basically trying to screw you, but not intentionally trying to screw you.
No,
you're just a foreign object in its environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's its space.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like I make a joke about that's how I know Bigfoot's real is because you can't see 30 yards one way in a place like that, and that's not even a real, foresty Bigfoot forest.
No.
But when I'm walking around Rockhound or whatever, and I come around a tree over here, and there's a 3-foot tall jackrabbit that scares the shit out of me that was frozen solid and then just takes off. That'll tell you right there. So yeah, man, there's something about it. There's just something about it. And I've been teased before about going to the desert and what do you do down there, and but it is
people have their assumptions.
Man, I'm telling you, for anyone listening right now, I've been in the rocks since I was a little kid. So my grandfather used to take me out in this little field that was on their basically the back. A field off the backside of their property.
Which grandfather was this?
Grandpa Gus.
Okay.
Old house, in Prescott, Arizona, and there's this little field. Like, this thing couldn't have been more than 100 yards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just a dirt. Wasn't even really a field with weeds. It was just kind of a dirt field. But we used to go out there and look for what he would call polished rocks, and these were legitimate agate that had been, water run forever.
Really?
And they were
pretty polished?
Polished.
No way.
All get out.
Wow.
Apache tears, things like that.
Wow.
Which, knowing a lot more about geology now, I've often wondered if he was just planting those suckers out there.
He very well could have been.
I never found anything that was like tiger's eye or anything like that.
Sure.
It was always more of a natural, but stuff that was super polished. So I just always had a huge affinity for rock hounding. But
right.
Like I said, for me and being into that, right, and being out there looking for that crystal or, looking for that piece of agate or that piece of whatever it is,
mm-hmm.
and you're just focused on the ground, it's almost, and you're just looking and you're looking and it's quiet and the wind and you can hear someone else over there or whatever, but it's impossible majority of the time to be thinking about other things of ordinary life.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is it's like the ultimate now moment. And I know that's very cliche and it's very new age and it's been said to death, but that doesn't make it any less true.
Nope.
The now moment where nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong. And it's funny because, I can only speak from personal experience, but my mind may wander to what I call a connection back home when I'm out there.
Right.
But 2 steps later, it's impossible to maintain that connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's just gone.
Yeah.
It's like the juniper trees just absorb it and bounce it away from me or whatever. It's amazing. It's amazing. And it's the simplest thing, but it's amazing.
It's such a silly little task you're doing, but
well, that's kind of the whole art of doing thing, right?
Yeah.
Anything, even you don't have to be outdoors for that. Anything you're doing, if you give it your full attention,
Yeah.
It sounds so corny, but I figured this out for myself, and it's not like a mastered practice. In fact, now that I'm saying it, I'm like, I need to get back on that. But it's like cleaning dishes, right? Like doing the dishes to load in the dishwasher or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me back up. Yard work. I hate yard work, right? I hate yard work, right? And so the last place I lived had an over landscaped yard, way too much stuff to take care of and whatnot. But, one Saturday I'm out there doing stuff and I'm just like, dude, this sucks. I'm trimming branches, all this crap. And then the idea just popped in my head. I'm like, no, you do it like you're in the desert. Like in the desert, if I got to go cut some branches or collect some wood, I'm not going, this sucks because I need that wood. So in doing yard work and I've got this little handsaw and I'm trimming back some stupid elm, trash trees.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh no, this is what I'm doing right now. Cut that right where you need to cut it. I need this. I need this over here. So everything I was doing was just very deliberate. And all of a sudden, that whole I hate doing yard work kind of melted away. And it just became way more enjoyable.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yard work doesn't suck. Nothing sucks.
Yeah, nothing.
You decide whether it sucks.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
right.
on you.
Because someone could go to the desert in Rockhound and be like, this sucks.
Sucks.
Yeah. No, that's true. The ultimate, yeah, that's it. It always comes back to perspective.
And it does. It sounds really cliche and cheesy. Oh, I need to cut this right here. And it sounds very silly in a lot of ways, but like you said, it doesn't make it any less true, and it's an excellent practice to practice.
Well, it works.
Oh, it totally works.
Yeah, because what you're doing is you're stepping into the now.
Yeah.
At that moment, that's what you're doing, and then all other stress and stuff goes away. Just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing about the art of doing. Instead of mentally masturbating about a task you have to do and thinking about it 2, 3, 4 times over 4 or 5 days.
Well, that's why it doesn't pay to be a procrastinator, because you know what that does mentally to you.
Yeah.
You procrastinate things, and then
it wears you down.
You start overthinking them, and it just mentally wears you down, and physically starts wearing you down.
Shortens your life, I believe.
It perpetuates the problem. Now you're even more likely to procrastinate it even longer, instead of just knowing that it's a task that needs to be done. And each task has its time and place. Maybe the first time you think about it, it's not time to do it yet. So set it aside and wait. Handle the task that is in front of you, and get back to that.
I'm the worst at that sometimes.
Are you?
I mean, I can't say I'm the worst, but it's the task that in my head, the story I've told myself that I don't like to do, that I procrastinate, and then it stresses me out and it gets worse. But then when I actually do the task, I'm like, dude, why did I spend so much time not doing this? A prime example of this, it just happened to me the other day. In the move recently, whether I did or not, I'm not sure, but I can't find him anywhere. I think I accidentally threw out Layla's birth certificate.
Oh, right.
And I'm just like, shit. It's one of those things that drive me crazy. And of course, she just happens to need it for a new job, right? So I'm sitting there going, crap, I've got to get a new birth certificate. And in my head, I'm telling myself this story about what a long, drawn-out process is going to be. And I don't even know where to begin. I know I can get online and just Google it, but I don't even do that for a couple days because I'm like, well, I make all the reasons why I don't need to worry about it.
Maybe I'll find it. Maybe it'll show up.
Right. But it doesn't. The whole time I'm stressing more. And then day comes where it's like, okay, I've got to get it, and I've got to, so you've got to go down to the Vital Records Department, in Salt Lake, and you got to bring a valid ID and fill out a form and pay $20, and I'm like, all right, well, that doesn't sound too bad, but I'm still like, I'm bitching and moaning. I got to go down. I got to get in the car. I got to drive down. So like, dude, I drive down. I'm there before I know it. I walk in this huge, massive building. I'm thinking it's going to be busy as hell in there. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. I get in there. There's one other person waiting. I walk up to the window. She's like, oh, yeah, fill this application. Fill out the application. Pay the $20. Sit down. And now I'm telling myself the story. I'm probably going to be sitting here for an hour.
Right.
Because it's a government building. And 10 minutes later, Mr. Spencer, here you go. I'm like, sweet.
That's it.
I'm gone. It was so much easier than I was thinking the whole time. The lesson being, and a lesson I never learn, or I learn it and then I forget it, and then I learn it and I forget it, is just get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Just do it. When you think of it or when it arises, if at all possible, just do it. Your quality of life goes up way more.
Listen, the universe has a way of balancing it out, and if there is a lesson you need to be taught, it finds a way to keep showing you that lesson until you decide to learn it. Big or small, relationship to those small meaningless tasks in a way.
That's so true. That's so true.
Be paying attention.
And some people go their whole lives and don't learn the lesson.
Well, it's a sad fact.
What's the analogy? Is the universe keeps throwing a snowball at you, and every time you go through the lesson again, the snowball gets bigger and bigger, which seems to be how
pretty
it
accurate.
happens.
Pretty
if you
accurate.
Don't learn your lesson the first time. The next time it comes around, usually the ramifications seem to be bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Where in the inverse of that is if you learn your lesson one time around, the next time it happens, you may still have some of the same things, but the effect is lessened on you.
Yeah, you're going to be able to handle it with much more grace.
Yeah.
And confidence.
Not perfectly. But
hell no. Because we ain't perfect.
Right. Well, that's true. Speak for yourself. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Ouch.
So topic shift really quick, or maybe it's not a topic shift really quick. I noticed you're holding that rock there. You've been holding this little. Eric's holding a little river stone, and it's got some sort of writing on it. It's got a kanji on it, either Chinese. I believe that's probably Chinese.
Looks like it.
What does that say?
The rock itself says peace.
Okay, and why? I've noticed you've had it for a couple weeks now. Why?
Oh. Um, it's been my rock. Metaphorically speaking, and quite literally, obviously. Just given life circumstance,
it's like a worry rock.
It's a presence rock.
Presence rock.
It's a presence rock.
Right.
In an effort to practice the now and practice presence and so on. Sometimes that's easier to do with an actual physical object that can remind you and train your brain in a way.
Right.
And so, given life circumstances and so on, I came home from work, while being at the parents' place, and this is just sitting on my pillow.
Right.
A couple of days after this happened, and I thought, that's nice, very nice. Picked it up, put it in my pocket.
Yeah.
Hasn't left since. Every day I grab it and I'll just rub it. If I'm getting anxious or worried about something or whatever it is, given the current circumstances,
right,
I'll stick my hand in my pocket, I'll take it out, or I'll just leave it in my pocket and I'll just rub it, and it helps bring me back to that place of
so it works.
Peace. Yeah, it helps for sure.
Okay, so like the reason I ask is because I assumed obviously that's what it was, right? Because
you've been seeing it for weeks.
Yeah, I've seen it for weeks, but also I remember watching some sort of documentary or something of that nature, and a gentleman was talking about it's kind of the same concept. He keeps a stone in his pocket, and sometimes he forgets it's there, but every morning it goes on his nightstand, or every night it goes on his nightstand. Every morning he puts it back in his pocket, and the concept for him is that every time he reaches in to grab his keys or grab his wallet or whatever, and he feels the stone, it's a reminder for him to have gratitude.
Oh, really?
Or to, think of something to be grateful for.
It's a great idea too.
Right. But it's the same concept.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm pretty sure this thing I was watching when it was on was one of these kind of metaphysical, visualize your life type of things or whatever.
Sure.
And again, like we talked about earlier, some would call that, I've heard the phrase a lot, hippy dippy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
New Age mumbo jumbo
or whatever else you want to call it. But again, it doesn't make any of that stuff less true.
No.
That's what I get frustrated about, man.
Yep.
It's like people tease and make jokes and things like that about this or that. But first of all, nowadays, the science is there for all that stuff. Why are people so resistant to?
Because it's so outside of their conditioning. And I think, especially for the people closest to you in life, because these people either grew up around you, have been around you long enough that they feel like they have this idea of who you are and what you represent. Right. And so they've already made their decision of labeled you and decided what you are to them, if that makes sense.
Of course.
I use this analogy, and I don't know if it makes any sense or not, but I'll throw it out there anyways.
Yes. Use the analogy.
Sorry. No, I'm just trying to put it in a good spot. But when speaking philosophically or psychologically or whatever it might be about the quote unquote new age mumbo jumbo, the people closest to you are the least likely to really hear you.
Of course.
Because they've already made their condensations in whatever it might be or have throughout the years. Fair enough, we're human, that happens.
Right.
But, who do you think you are because you've researched this or read these books or saw a different perspective? Who do you think you are to tell me anything about it? That's kind of the approach it gets sometimes. Well, I tell you what. Yeah, I use the analogy of, taking your car to a mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
You take it to him because he has experience, he has knowledge, he's studied, he has done these things. So you entrust your car to him, to make sure it gets repaired properly. And sometimes it doesn't, But the idea that you respect that because he has the knowledge, but you don't respect this because someone else has the knowledge. And I think it's because of that close relationship.
Well, it's probably also because it's a little less tangible. Because essentially what you're talking about is you're learning a skill set.
Right.
And the thing is I think part of the thing you're talking about, people close to you, that happens is because you may learn a skill set and you may put it into practice, but then 4 months down the road, because of human nature, you fall back into old patterns, and then you come back around to it again. So people see that and they go, "Oh, dude, you know, whatever." But all that doesn't matter.
No,
because it only matters ultimately because even if, and I'm not saying this is you, but if you're the guy who's learned something new that is the new age mumbo jumbo or whatever, a new way of thinking that's working for you at the time, because there isn't good or bad, it's just working or not working.
Right.
But in that moment, like the question I think you got to ask yourself, if someone close to you, whoever they are, if they're like, or who are you to think this or that, if that comes across to you and whether it's legitimate or not, if that has an effect on you, then it's possible that part of what, and again, not necessarily you, because I can only speak from my own experience here, but there's times when, you know, I've maybe read a new book that's totally changed my perspective on something, and I'm sharing it with people, whatever, and then I got people close to me going, "Oh yeah, whatever," and I'm like kind of bugged by that. I'm like, well, you know, screw you or whatever. But that's just my ego.
Right.
It's just my ego, because it really doesn't matter. The information that you're taking in is for you,
right?
Ultimately,
right.
And it's very funny because it's actually contradictory. Most of that kind of writing and teachings would tell you that it really doesn't matter what the other person thinks necessarily when it comes to that stuff. But
well, you ain't doing anything about it anyways.
No, but it is definitely fascinating.
Yeah,
you know, that people close to you are the least likely to accept the change you have.
Why not have an open mind? Why not openly and honestly communicate with the person about it? Why do we have these blinders that just reject it? Well, that's just reject. And again, that's the ego coming out.
But that's more about them and their situation than about you and yours.
No, for sure.
Because that's the thing with like being negative, right? Being negative about things. It's like it takes less effort to be positive. And you're risking nothing to be positive. And people say, well, if you're being positive about what may or may not be happening, it's like, oh, well, I know people that always expect the worst, that are always like, well, this is probably going to happen, or what, you know, yeah, I'll do it, but I'm sure blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, that may be 100% true, but you're better off telling yourself that it's not going to be the bad thing. Because the moments between now and when you get to whatever it is you're worried about or being negative about, you might as well have the best quality of life possible. And then if it happens, but so many people, they want that confirmation of, yeah, I knew it. I'm not going to put my hopes up high for this. Yeah. And I think it's kind of the same thing. It's that people, they tend towards, you know, because there's people that are super optimistic people, you know, which I think is a better way to try to be with things. But again, it's not black and white, and everybody's different, and everybody, you know.
No. I mean, it's about being real at the same time. Optimism is obviously glass half full is a great thing, but no, life is not gonna give you that crap, you know.
Right.
There's shit. There's negative stuff. It's gonna happen.
Yeah, but just let it happen.
But let it happen.
Yeah. No sense toiling over it.
Why get all anxious and worry about it before something's even happened or not?
Yeah.
You know.
And that's well, that key word you just said, being anxious.
Oh,
you know
my
what I mean?
Gosh.
I think technology adds to anxiety big time.
Big time. I mean, just society in general anymore.
Yeah.
Struggle with anxiety for a long, long time. And
same.
It is horrendous.
So does the rock help with anxiety? Or what does it help with most? The peace rock?
I think it's a combination of all of it together. You know, if I'm anxious, or if I'm worried, or I mean, it's all the same form, really. You know,
it's all the same core.
Yeah, you can
lizard brain evolutionary reaction to a situation. Yeah.
Yeah, you can map it back to fear at the end of the day.
That's what it's,
you know.
Fear.
But whatever it is, it does help. You know, and like I said, I had anxiety for a number of years. Like, I mean, a knot in your chest from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed.
From what?
Past experience, you know.
Even though the experience is gone, I already knew the answer to that question.
Right.
But I just think it's interesting. So the experience is gone, the interaction is gone, and you're still having the anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't...
Because you're in a similar situation, or are you even in a similar situation, but you still have the anxiety for no reason?
No, I had the anxiety.
Stress.
Yeah, pretty much is what it is for the most part, and not recognizing it and truly dealing with it. And
Right.
I was just trying to live with it instead of, trying to heal it and fix it.
Right. Trying to, yeah.
But
Isn't that weird?
After fixing it, again, learn the lessons. There's a lesson in it all. Find them. Please find them. They're in there. And after it, oh my God, I can't even. It puts a smile on my face just thinking about that feeling of peace finally, and not having that anxiety day after day.
Right.
In that worry. And we're human. Things come up. Something happens, an event, someone, whatever it might be. It can flare. It can flare. But it's like watching The Thinker. The more you do it, the shorter that time becomes. It gets quicker and quicker before it is just naturally instinctual to do it.
To where it's just being in the now.
Right.
Yeah.
And in curbing the anxiety or depression, whatever it might be. But
yeah. Well, it's like super frustrating is because I think you and I probably mirror a lot of the same sentiment when it comes to that stuff. And it's almost a form of torture in my mind if I really sit down and think about it. But, whether it's interacting with certain individuals that have a greater understanding of how things work in human nature and you learn a lot from them, or it's a documentary you watched, or it's a book you've read that was really powerful and had meaning and it moved you and it changed the way you thought about things, and you have a bigger understanding, a broader understanding, and it's basically so it served you well. But then to get away from that in time and put distance between time of learning something new of that nature that was really kind of eye-opening or philosophically for lack of a better word, not to sound too grandiose, but awakening.
Right.
But to get time away from that and then be going through something in life, whether it's little or small, and then knowing better. I call that knowing better. You know better. You know how you should react. You know what patterns you have. You know the best way to go about the situation, but you don't, because those old deep patterns, those deep grooves in the record are where the needle slips back into. But it's almost like a form of torture because now you know better.
Yeah.
That's what.
Well, that's a slippery slope if you're not careful.
Exactly.
Very slippery.
Which is again is part of the practice of it is then not to beat yourself up about the fact that you know better and blah blah blah.
Well, that's why they say ignorance is bliss. In a way, because
right.
Had you not known better,
well,
it's much more easy to go, meh, whatever.
People will quickly find out through this podcast that neither you or I are very religious people on any means. But that's what people don't realize in the script in the Bible. I think it's the New Testament, and like I said, I'm not a biblical scholar by any means. But when Christ says on the cross, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do."
Right.
That makes sense on the surface, but people don't really understand what that means.
Mm-mm.
And I like to explain it to people as it was explained to me, because I was like, whoa, because in how you interact with people, it can make a huge difference, right? So I'm going to correlate two stories. One is someone telling me their explanation of that, and two is a documentary I saw called The Elegant Universe, narrated by Brian Greene, a brilliant physicist. And he explains a kind of physics that is so hard for the human brain to conceptualize. And it's talking about having, I think, 13 dimensions, right?
Right.
It's like trying to explain physics to a dog.
Right.
The dog has no ability, no fault of its own to comprehend complex physics.
Right.
Forgive them, for they know not what they do. If you are holding someone accountable for something they've done, right, that's at, let's say, a level 3, and that's an arbitrary picture, a vertical stack, and there's the third level, okay? If they've never experienced what it's like to be at a 4 or a 5 in their personal life, you cannot hold them accountable as if they should be carrying themselves at a 6 level.
Right.
You can only hold people accountable for what they've experienced. Now, if they've experienced it and they're acting like a 3 when their experience is a 6, and I'm hoping this makes sense, but forgive them for they know not what they do, is basically that. Is that if you're interacting with someone, and especially, younger people or having teenage girls, I'm always having to remind myself, okay, they don't know what I know or have experienced what I've experienced, so I can't put those same expectations on them until they've had a chance to experience. It's the same thing. I used to remember growing up religious and having youth leaders. I can tell this story too much, but sitting us all down. I remember I was probably about 16 or 17 and going, trying to explain to us that we didn't understand love in the male-female way.
Right.
You guys are too young. You don't understand it. So you may think you're in love, but you're not really in love. And the concept was so very clear to me at the time. I remember thinking, and this falls all in line, I remember thinking in my head, wait a minute, that may very well be true in the objective world. But in the subjective world of a teenage girl or boy,
right,
love is whatever the level is that they've experienced.
Yeah.
Whatever they assign as love, that's the ultimate. That is love to them.
Yeah.
They don't know the love for a child or the love of a lifelong partner,
right?
Or in the sacrifice and the compromise and all that. Right. But you can't hold them accountable at that level because they've never experienced it. So which is a very hard thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with people that you feel have screwed you over or have wronged you or whatever.
That's expectations. That's what's so slippery with that slope.
Yeah.
Setting those expectations.
Well, I know I'm rambling here, but it just sparked another thing. I was driving. This is back when I first moved to Utah, and I was still somewhat LDS, and I was driving in. Don't ask me why or what the hell for, but I was driving in a car I was in the backseat of a car with the bishop of a new ward I'd moved into, and his first counselor was in passenger seat.
I don't think this story is appropriate for our podcast, sir.
Well, here's what's funny is we were driving down a not too busy road, and I'm pretty sure we were going the speed limit, and I'm sitting in the back seat, and I don't know these guys at all, but I'm not saying anything. Out of the blue, a car comes flying by us on the shoulder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Zoom, flies by, zips back in front of us, and keeps going. And this is just a 2-lane road basically kind of in a quasi neighborhood area. And I remember the guy in the passenger seat was like, "What? I can't believe that! What a jerk!" He's Mormon cursing that guy up and down. And the bishop sitting there in the driver's seat, was like, "Brother Smith," he's like, "Let's calm down a little bit. We don't know if that guy just found out his child was in a car accident or if his wife is in the hospital. We don't know why. No. He very well may have just been irritated and went around unsafely the wrong way illegally, but he also might have been in a emergency situation, so the point is that you never know.
Right.
It's, again, you got to be careful because sometimes you just don't know. So.
It just seems, and we're all guilty of it. No one's perfect, but we all get frustrated and have bad days, and that just compounds and so on. But at the end of the day, it just sounds like a much more peaceful way to exist. There's enough shit to worry about in this life. Why add to the pile of shit? Why make mountains out of molehills?
Because it keeps them from thinking about their own shit.
No, for sure, it's a distraction effort. Yeah. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. It definitely is a crazy thing. I was just thinking, the reason I kind of hesitated there is I was looking down at my little notes right here. I don't know how we went from playing disc golf to the ultimate.
That's the beautiful thing about conversations.
I know, man. They just go any which way.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things, if you're a new listener to the podcast, this is the Enter as Strangers podcast, and I think it's probably pertinent to this conversation is that we're kind of going back and forth between naming it Enter as Strangers or calling it Stories Adjacent, which is a little bit more complicated of a name for a podcast, but that's exactly what we're talking about here, right? You start a conversation, especially if you've got 3 people in a conversation, and it's just amazing which direction the conversations can go and what tangents they fly off on.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Well, man, that's a little over an hour. So that being said,
Oh, damn.
yeah, this is Enter as Strangers.
You want to go shoot off some fireworks now?
Fireworks for the 24th of July. So for anyone listening to this that doesn't know what the 24th of July is in Utah, it is a state holiday in which, and I hopefully am getting this right, it's a state holiday in which the state celebrates the Mormon pioneers settling in the Utah Valley. Right? Am I right?
That's what I've always been told, yes.
Yeah, and celebrating their trek from back east over the Rockies into the Salt Lake Valley, in which they displaced a bunch of Native Americans. No, I'm just kidding. Well, some of that's true, but yeah. So happy 24th of July. This is Strangers. Have a good night.
Thanks.